March 9, 2023. We're going to call the meeting to order and begin recording, I assume, for consumption later. I don't think we're streaming live today, but this will be available to be viewed on the Marb website. So perhaps CTN will. Thank you all for coming. I want to apologize for missing the last two regular board meetings in January. I was completing the writing for the governor of his proposal for the biennial budget for the next 2 years for the state of Connecticut, so that occupied a little bit of our time in January. Last month's meeting, I became rather ill the night before and needed that morning to recover, so I apologize for missing that. I won't go into detail, Bob. But I'm here now, and I want to acknowledge my new co-chair, as I did at the Marb, at the subcommittee meeting, West Haven subcommittee meeting the other day, Andrea Comer from the Treasurer's Office, representing Treasurer Russell. Ms. Comer, do you have any comments for us this morning?
No, just good morning and thank you all.
All right, we'll get going then. We start with our public comment period, as we always do, as indicated on your agenda. Members of the public will be provided an opportunity to speak. Please, before making comments, seek recognition from the chair if you would. We may ask you, well, we are asking you, please limit your comments due to our time constraints. We're scheduled for about a 2-hour meeting today. I'd like to keep to that if we can, respectful of everyone's time. With that, I'll open it up to public comment. Simon, is there anyone on the line or in the room who wishes to make public comments? Just one more announcement.
Good morning. I have a comment.
Yes. Who's that?
Good morning. My name is Paige Weinstein, and I'm calling on behalf of West Haven.
Okay.
For full disclosure, I am also running for mayor for West Haven for the next election. But my comments are not about that, but I don't want to portray myself in another way. The residents of West Haven are inundated with the bad press. Many people feel hopeless. I understand that there is a process that everything goes through. I understand that we're waiting to get back a report, and I know on the agenda today, an update will be done from Woodesley. But I need to let you know that it's almost like we cannot get through a day without something new happening in our town. And I just really appeal to all of you to be as prompt and as quick as you can be in getting us some resolution. And now, as people are leaving City Hall, with Doug Coulter leaving and without having a director of finance, we even feel like we're falling lower than we thought was the bottom to begin with. So I just really appeal to all of you to please work as promptly and as quickly as you do. We appreciate you, but we need help. And I thank you for them. I thank you for the time.
We appreciate those comments. Yes. Mr. White? Sure.
First of all, thank you for calling in. We may be discussing later the notion of how to encourage public comment, such as the one you've made. So that, as you said, a lot of people in West Haven have issues, and we'd kind of like to hear them. Do you have any thoughts of how we could do that efficiently?
I do, actually, if there would be an opportunity to even do a town hall type meeting, and I don't know if that is a possibility, but to allow people to come in and limit the time, obviously, but to give people the opportunity to speak. During the course of the business day, we are a working community. People are at work. And later tonight, everybody will listen, or they will wait for the video to appear and watch this. People have stopped. I know that there's times when people have reached out to various board members, and there is, and we know that there's a process, but we don't know that we're heard. And so we know we're heard when we watch the video, when we watch or we listen to it. But I think that if there could be some type of town hall meeting that would allow you to see the people that are being affected by everything that's going on. This kind of becomes passive aggressive. We have this We have this trash program that conceivably will better the town because it will reduce the cost in a problem that the entire state has and a problem that really is across the United States. But people stop and say, well, I'm not going to do this because I pay taxes and it doesn't matter. So I'm going to put a painting in this green bag. I'm going to put shoes in this bag. So we're almost becoming a bit passive aggressive instead of anything being productive in moving forward. But I think that if people could actually see you all and stop and say, we're tired and here we are, we're gathering as a community to say to all of you, we need help. I think that that would be an amazing, amazing scenario.
Thank you. I mean, this would be a meeting about bigger issues, not, what goes into the trash. I mean, that's
No, but it's all the different, I'm using that as an example of the fact that people feel that they have no voice. So the only thing that they can do is something as silly as that, because it's a way of saying, okay, I did something. But I think that if we had the opportunity to talk to you and to all of you and find out about the plan, and these are the concerns that we have about our community, and really it's more so about sewers that are falling apart. It's more about a lack of economic growth. It's more about the money that's missing that we're not insured for that came up on the last Marb meeting. Those are real issues. It's just the idea that people don't have a method in which to converse with all of you, or otherwise if it's just the idea that there's even a specific email that is addressed for West Haven residents so that they can even just jot a quick email and just say, hey, this is how I feel, or these are the concerns I have, or these are things that are going on in the town that are not hitting the talking points. The sewers are a huge talking point, and the expense that we go through when they collapse and we have people up in hotels and the cost of fixing them. And again, this is all going to boil down to the taxpayers, and the taxpayers are, they're scared as well, in my opinion.
Other members of the public online, or see anyone with their hands up there, Simon? Wait just a second. If there's anyone online who wants to add a comment, please let us know. All right. If there are no other comments, no other hands up, we'll proceed. That's food for thought. We'll give those comments due consideration. We'll move on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes of our regular meeting from February 16, 2023. Draft minutes were distributed as part of your meeting materials. Discussion of the minutes from the last meeting.
Move to approve.
Motion
Feliciano, second.
seconded by Mr. Falsigno in the room. Any other discussion? With that then, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
No. I will abstain since I did not attend. We'll move on then to the next item. Discussion of the process for municipal inquiries is the innocent sounding name of the item here. What we intend is a posting on our website, and this was distributed with your meeting materials. This came from a request from a member of the board to provide public option here for the public to make reports or complaints with the auditors of public accounts, the FBI, other law enforcement officials. We're going to put this on the Marb website, which is on the Office of Policy Management website. It's within there. It has complaint information about how to file complaints, a couple of links to the auditors of public accounts by going to their website or by calling them. There's a phone number. There's an email you can use. There's indication how you can reach the FBI in their New Haven office, as well as a tip line that the FBI maintains, as well as information about how to make reports to justice. Now, obviously, these are the kinds of complaints that you'd make to the auditors and to the FBI and to law enforcement are going to be in the nature of violations of law, or at least in the case of the auditors, violations of financial propriety. So that information is now going to be available, folks, from our website. I believe, and I'll look to Ms. Kennison for this, the auditors of public accounts do have involvement with our municipalities. There's a state audit that they have to file on an annual basis. So the APA would interest themselves in propriety at the local level.
Determine whether it should stay with them or if it should go to the Attorney General's office, or give advice. It depends on if they want to go in anonymous or not anonymous.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if there is a conversation going on, the public cannot hear.
Oh, you have your mic on? Green?
Green now. Okay, sorry.
Can you hear Mr. White now?
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Be careful what you ask for.
We have mics in the room that have to be activated, so please remember to activate your mic in time to be heard.
I mean, just a quick summary is it sounds like this line can be used on the public auditors for misuse of local funds, which is what I was, as opposed to state or federal. I think we should follow up on the comment that I think has been made here before, and that the caller suggested, which is two things: maybe a town hall meeting, and maybe just a simple email account. You know, Marb West Haven line, and you know, we could spread it around and volunteer and pick it up, because I think we need, and Whittisley may need, you know, they can't look at everything, but if someone says, I think something's going on, and again, we don't want to smear anybody by, you know, unsubstantiated rumors or comments. So I think that anyway, I think we ought to put that on the agenda and see what it would take to do that in addition to this. I think this is helpful, but this is a little more formal. I don't know what other people think, but and encouraging people to call in. We had a caller last time. We had a caller this time. I think that's very helpful that we hear and people recognize that Marb is trying to do something. And you know, I haven't seen too many magic bullets. So, you know, if people have some ideas, I think we could say.
Yeah, just to respond to that, I'm open to the idea that we as a board can consider having a town hall in West Haven, something we can think about planning. Certainly open to that. We have to figure out the logistics of that. With regard to an email account that we establish, we would be then creating public records that are FOIable. So I'd have concerns about that if we undertook as a Marb to establish an email complaint line. The APA has processes, FBI obviously, DCJ obviously, and I think there are FOI exemptions that will pertain to all of that. I'm not sure that would pertain to us if we had an email account. So I'd be less interested in that. open to a town hall. Obviously, people can send us information. They can email me. Anybody can email me anything, anytime. My email address is out there. Ms. Kennison's is. We're public officials. Happy to take that. I guess I would also observe with regard to complaints, I'd hope that the city itself has a process in place. I hope and believe that Whittlesey, when they bring us their report, one of the things I'm sure they'll tell us is there ought to be an ethics office. There ought to be avenues for this kind of whistleblowing at the local level. So if that's not already the case, I hope it will be in short order. So there should be multiple avenues for that sort of thing to come. Mr. Hamilton seems to want to say something.
I was just going to add, I have seen some cases, and it dovetails exactly with what you were saying, but I have seen some cases where auditors who are doing a financial statement audit, municipalities in some cases have recommended municipality establish a whistleblower line or a fraud hotline or something along that line. It just as not because of any particular issue that may have cropped up, but just as a matter of sort of good governance. The bigger a place gets, more useful that can be. So I think that's something I support looking at. I do think, ideally, it would be under the auspices of the city itself. Although, I guess people could debate that what's the best place for such a whistleblower hotline.
Kennison?
Couple of things. One, for your information, Mr. White, I wanted to make you aware that Representative Dorinda Bora actually this week had a coffee and conversation meeting with the town, and that gave the residents an opportunity to go and speak with her. So I'm aware of that, and so I think that that was very receptive, is what I heard. And secondly, when you speak about the whistleblower, it doesn't necessarily all have to go to the local level. They could put in there as a best practice with their controls that could be a third party who is monitoring that, and that is part of the internal audit structure. That would then come back to the internal auditors, right up to their audit firms.
Other comments, questions, concerns about the inquiry process here? All right, we'll move on to our first municipality today. City of Hartford is with us. I see Mr. Freund has joined us. We've got a subcommittee update. I'm sorry, was there someone else? Our first item there is the subcommittee update. There was no February subcommittee meeting in the City of Hartford, but we do have an agenda item to review and discuss refunding of Hartford bonds. And I believe Sarah Sanders, I see her on my screen. She's waving at me now. It's here to let us know what that's about.
Good morning. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Sarah Sanders. I'm the Deputy State Treasurer for the state of Connecticut for State Treasurer Eric Russell. Thank you for making some time for us on your busy agenda this morning. Also with me here today is Ernie Lormer from Soder and Associates, bond counsel to our office. And we're here to provide a very high-level overview of a City of Hartford refunding transaction that will be coming to the full Marb for approval next month. We did provide a 2-page summary for your review. And just a little background on why we're here. So in 2018, the State Treasurer and the Secretary of OPM entered into a contract assistance agreement with the City of Hartford to pay contract assistance equal to the debt service on their general obligation bonds. With the passage of time, some of those bonds are callable, and a larger chunk is becoming callable on April 1 of this year, which makes those bonds economical to refinance. At the request of the state, the Treasurer and the Secretary of OPM, the City of Hartford is working with us to execute a refunding, which will save about, based on current market conditions, roughly $10 million over the next 10 years. Now, because the state is paying the debt service on these bonds, all the savings will accrue to the state's general fund. The transaction we're looking at right now is a preliminary issuance amount of about 112.9 million. These will be City of Hartford bonds, but they're backed by state contract assistance. We have a targeted sale date of April 26th and closing date of May 10th. But before that can occur, certain approvals are needed, including the Marb. So on March 26th, we plan to work with the Marb subcommittee for Hartford to review the transaction. And then on March 27th, we'll be going to the Hartford City Council for approval, which is required. And then April 13th, the full Marb will be asked to approve the sale. So today is just a courtesy heads up that this transaction is coming for Marb approval. And I'd be happy to take any high-level questions you may have now.
Thank you, Sarah. So you said this particular tranche is worth about 113 million?
That the bonds we'd need to refund them are about 113 million.
Yep. What, how much does that represent of the total that was contract assistance was entered into for?
Well, the original amount was 540 million. I'd have to follow up with the amount that's outstanding now. Maybe Ernie has that, but some of that's been paid down.
Okay. Well, I like the sound of $10 million inuring to the benefit of the state general fund. So thank you very much for that. Any questions, comments, concerns at this time? Obviously, we're going to take this up at the subcommittee as well as the full meeting next month, but we appreciate this two-page summary and your overview and your heads up.
Thank you.
Mr. White has a question.
Just a quick one. This sounds great, but how are the interest rates more favorable now than they were before?
Well, a lot of these bonds have 5% coupons. In the tax-exempt market, a lot of bonds sell with premium coupons, which do make them economical to refund, particularly with the passage of time, because you're refunding it with a shorter bond than the original bond that was issued. So yes, we are still having savings. Interest rates have started to increase in the last couple of weeks. They were heading in the right direction, but we do still have savings on these bonds, in part because the passage of time, we can refund them with shorter bonds.
That does raise the question in my mind, with the passage of time, will the increase in rates probably limit our ability then to get some savings going forward as they become callable?
Well, that's,
I mean, I know you guys will look at that,
yeah.
but
There are other bonds that will come into the money, and we already are thinking ahead to future refundings, but you're correct that, if rates continue to rise, the savings will be reduced or they may not be worthwhile to refund. But because these municipal bonds do sell with these premium coupons, you still often can get savings.
very good. Other questions? Any hands up? See any hands? All right. Thank you very much. We will move on to a discussion of the city's monthly financial report. This was provided in your meeting materials. Both the city and the Board of Ed are here to discuss their respective parts of the budget. Am I recognizing the mayor?
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Secretary. And we have Julian there in person and Leanne online. If I can just briefly, I believe the answer to your last question about the amount remaining of the general obligation bonds that had been issued prior to 2016. I believe the number is 396 million outstanding. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the other reason for the interest payments savings is that these now benefit from the enhanced credit that comes with the contract assistance. And obviously, as a city, we support anything that will reduce the state's obligations. And I have submitted a resolution to the city council supporting that.
Thank you.
With respect to our monthly report, we've seen some improvement since our last report. So we are now currently projecting a net positive variance at the end of the fiscal year of 7.18 million. This is driven primarily by a favorability on the revenue side, and it's the same trends that we had been seeing over the last couple of months. In particular, continued positivity in interest income as a result of interest rates. So it's an increase of just shy of $1 million in favorability over last month's report. In addition, we have had positive tax collection. We're projecting here favorability over last report of about $374,000. I think that remains a conservative number. Our tax collection has been strong, and I believe that we're going to see some additional positive variance in the final months of the year, but we're remaining conservative in our projections. And then we have some favorability on conveyance fees and various license and permit activity as well. And I will also note that these revenue projections do not include any additional revenue beyond budgeted from the parking authority, but we are seeing some positive trends there as well. So positive revenue trends and still conservative in our projections. On the expenditure side, we have had some increase in overtime, consistent with the trends we've seen so far this year, largely offset by attrition, but some net unfavorability there. And then in legal fees, we had been projecting an overage. That overage is increased here by about $300,000, largely as a result of a fairly significant settlement on a workers' comp case that involved COVID. It was a complicated case, but we think a settlement that was in the best interests of the city. And then finally, on the utility side, we're still projecting an overage, although we actually have seen that overage decline a little bit from last period, which is mostly a change in our forecast for water expenses. So we're keeping a close eye on our property tax collection, our overtime, legal expenses, utilities, and health insurance claims. On the health insurance claims, we've continued to see a continuation of the positive trends that we've been seeing for a while. So that's the quick summary.
So on the non-education side, we're still in the black?
Correct. So again, I think a
Okay.
conservative projection at this point of 7.18 million positive variance when we reach the end of the fiscal year. And as you know, consistent with our past practice, we've used those surpluses primarily for two purposes. One is to continue to build up fund balance to try to reach the target that was set together with the Marb. And then secondly, to continue to invest in our capital needs without additional borrowing.
I'm a little new to this. If you had a surplus on the city side, could you use it to balance on the education side?
We could, and although I will wait for the board's presentation, I think at this point, I don't believe we're anticipating a need to do that in this fiscal year.
Okay, that's good. Well, then let's hear from the board. What's going on?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity again to speak. Good to see you all again. Well, as the mayor just kind of stole my thunder here a little bit, if you'll notice in the memo, and I do need to make an apology up front, changed the memo, forgot to change the header on the memo. The correct date of the memo is March 2nd. And of course, I'm speaking to the January actual results at this point. And as you'll see in the cover memo of what was submitted to Marb, we moved down the expectation on the deficit by a few $1 million in the previous month, projecting 3.5 to 4.5. Although I would also acknowledge in the memo that that's a very conservative number, mostly because as we build the projections, we anticipate every non-personnel expense gets fully expended, and that's not typically the case. And the other thing that we're now looking at is vacancies in our grant funds to see if there are opportunities that we can move some expenses around and produce a further savings. So I'm still guardedly optimistic that I think we're going to get down to a balanced budget by year end. And I always qualify that slightly by saying based on what we now know, still with 4 months to go in the fiscal year.
Okay, I have a deficit mitigation PowerPoint, it looks like, that the Hartford subcommittee received. And I believe on 5th page, you were looking at a $18 to $26 million in potential savings.
Yep.
How much of that? So what's the hole at the moment?
So right now we actually had our Board of Education adopt a budget that was balanced on Tuesday night, I want to say. So we got down to both a combination of increased revenue and a decrease in our expenditures, utilizing some of our ESSER funds, and got to a place where we were within $2 million of a balanced budget. The board agreed to incorporate a budget task into the budget of just under $2 million, which means that we're going to continue to work to identify an additional $2 million worth of savings between now and the end of the 23-24 fiscal year. And in context of a budget approaching $450 million, I'm fairly confident we could find that $2 million.
Okay. What are the revenue estimate changes you made?
There are three basic components to that. One is we became aware of a new state grant that's designed to help offset our increase in magnet tuition costs. We do not have an exact amount yet from CSDE, but we're anticipating about a $3 million benefit from that. We looked at our special education billing, which is how we bill sending districts that are sending their students to us, and what we're able to bill for the special education services that we provide to them. That was about a $500,000 increase versus our initial estimates. And then the board agreed to go forward with a plan of using about $9.2 million worth of our ESSER funds as a means of help balancing the budget for 23-24.
How do you feel about the fact that ESSER is one-time revenue and you're using it for ongoing?
Yep. That was a very strong caution I put out to everybody saying, look, this will impact 24-25 very directly. We've talked a lot about the fiscal cliff that happens post ESSER. There's a broad recognition that we basically have bought ourselves 12 months to figure out a new cost structure that allows for not only the loss of ESSER, but starts to address some of the systemic deficit issues that we've been encountering here as a result of declining enrollment and other factors. Okay.
Giving yourself a little task for next year then.
I call it a big task, Ashley.
I feel your pain, by the way. Ours is ARPA. 2 million, the 2 million plan.
Yes.
What's in that?
Nothing yet, and that's being just very candid, right? It's I come from a corporate environment. We would call it a budget task. Okay. That we're accountable for identifying $2 million worth of savings over the next 16 months.
Okay, I'm going to let the board ask questions now. Mr. Falsigno.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. You can mitigate the 2 million this year, or you figured out how to overcome the shortfall, right?
Yes.
And you're already starting in the hole next year, 9 million.
For 24-25.
That's something I think everybody has to think about. I mean, that's quite a hole.
State budget, Mr. Falsigno.
What's that?
You should see the state budget.
Can I comment? No. That was a joke.
That's a little aside.
That was a joke. That's a side note.
Go ahead.
So, well, good luck with that. I'm more interested in. I'm really interested within a short period of time, over maybe the next couple meetings, especially in the subcommittee meetings. It'd be really interesting on what your plans are to mitigate the 9 million, because that seems to be, my view, quite a hurdle.
Well, if I'm going to be blunt, Mr. Falsigno, it's more than 9 million, right? Our average increase in costs just on an inflationary basis are 13 million a year. So what we really have to get after, and I've warned both administration here and the board about this, is we're probably looking at a $24 to $25 million deficit as we look at 24-25.
Well, even more exciting. That would, it'd be interesting to see what your plans are for that. I think that's a pretty, quite a hurdle.
I would agree.
Chief Penn, one question. You have a reserve that's already a portion of the fund balance within the city of 2%. If I did rough numbers, is that running in that $8 million area if you needed to use reserves? Am I?
I actually, our plan for this year contemplates the use of those reserves already.
Okay. I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
No, and I think to the extent that if we have a surplus that we're projecting by some reason by the end of this year, we would look to refund that surplus and start building it back up again.
Maybe I should, just for my own edification, refocus here. Where do you think we missed planning for this year? This is a significant development. What did we miss?
So the last couple of memos, I tried to detail a little bit of that, right? The one big miss, for instance, we had is a drop of $7.7 million in our managed school operating grant. And that came from a shift in enrollment. The way the managed school operating grant works, we receive a little over $13,000 per student from the state, but only from the suburban students that attend our magnet schools. So when we looked at the actual number of suburban students attending this year versus what we had projected, it was a drop of roughly 500 students. It was a huge shift in magnitude in terms of the number of suburban students that we lost. Second big piece that we had is tuition that we're paying to CREC. I've highlighted the fact that we had 300 more Hartford residents attending CREC schools this year than we did have last year. And on top of that is compounded by CREC this year is year one of a 3-year tuition hike. It's $900 per student this year, $800 per student next year, $700 per student the year after that. Based on our actual experience on our fringe rate, or our fringe cost, I should say, we ticked up the fringe cost estimate slightly this year. That was about a $2 million impact. So those are probably the 3 biggest components where we're seeing actuals this year differentiated from what we had originally planned.
Other questions from the board? Julian, anything else we need to know?
May I add one thing to
Yes,
this? If that's
Mr. Mayor,
okay?
go ahead.
The one thing I just want to highlight for the board and for you, Mr. Secretary, is that some of this fiscal pressure in the years ahead is a result that is predictable and predicted consequence of the recent chef settlement. As you have more students going to magnets as called for in that chef settlement, that will increase the tuition payments that Phil just talked about, and it will reduce the student count at the Hartford Public Schools, both creating some significant fiscal uncertainty because it's difficult to predict the student enrollment years into the future, and putting pressure on certain schools because you can't predict where those student losses will occur. And so it does not make it easy to plan over the long term for enrollment at particular schools and right size accordingly. So I just want to highlight the intersection between those two issues because it is very real. And again, this was something that was discussed when that settlement was reached, but it's a real issue, and particularly the tuition issue, which I believe is an element that's considered in one of the bills that's being considered by the legislature this year, is an important part of that.
Appreciate that clarification. Other questions, comments for the board or for the city? Kurt White.
Green. Just to follow up on the mayor's comment, is there something before the legislature this session or the upcoming session to fund the what you've described as sort of the increase in costs as a result of the chef settlement?
There is. I'm aware of House Bill 5003 that has a specific proposal in there, among other things, to shift the cost of managed school tuition directly back to the state, rather than leaving it to the local districts.
I'll see them at the table in May on that. They've got to solve the same math problem I did, so we'll see where that goes. Spoiler alert, Secretary of OPM is on the Marb. Mr. Felsigno?
just listening to all this, and obviously, I appreciate what the mayor has said because he's always insightful, and I always appreciate his comments. Just seems to me that as a person that does pay state taxes, shifting from one to the other, I guess that's
Yeah.
kind of the way it's
You know
done.
what?
But
That's a debate we're going to have.
Right.
I'm going to have that with my colleagues on the appropriates committee in May. So I don't think that's something the Marb should
Okay.
debate.
but
But
maybe on the items.
certainly
that
your
are-
points will take in with
Right.
me. But go ahead.
Okay. No, all I'm saying is that these are isolated issues. There's 3 or 4 key components that they
Mhm.
mentioned, and I'd be interested in seeing how they're going to attack them on an
Yep.
individual basis.
And they clearly have to let us know that in the coming weeks, approach the end of the fiscal year. Well, Mr. Penn and Mr. Mayor and Mr. Freund, you have my best wishes. Anything I can do to help, let me know. Of course, we have our own issues at the state level, but
Careful what you offer, Mr. Secretary.
Exactly.
I'm always careful with you, sir. Any other questions from the board? I think we'll move on. Thank you, City of Hartford, for that presentation. We appreciate your diligence and wish you all the best there.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
We'll move to the City of West Haven. Subcommittee update. A written update was provided with your written materials. Oh, look at that. It was. Ms. Kennison can update. I think we're going to hit most of these points actually in the agenda, but if there's a couple here that are not on our agenda, maybe you can highlight them now.
Correct. We are going to, of the, I think it's 11 items that are listed on here. There are only 3 of them that are going to not be covered today, so I won't touch on any of those others. We held a subcommittee on March the 2nd. One of the items of discussion was the Board of Education of West Haven. They presented their proposed budget for 2024, and the Superintendent Neil Cavallera mentioned to us that they were in good shape for the fiscal year 2024 budget, and that they're putting most of their funds towards students, and that in the upcoming years, in the 5-year plan, Mayor Rossi had committed to giving additional funds to the Board of Education as they've been flat funded for a number of years. My question here to this group is that in the past, this is going to be the first time that we have Tier 4 with West Haven, and whether in the past we took the board's budget and we did all the work at the subcommittee level and we didn't bring it to the full board. So I was wondering if there was an interest to do that or to keep it at the subcommittee level, and we would then just look at the West Haven budget as a whole. Something to think about so I know whether to schedule it for full Marb presentation or not.
I think we ought to err on the side of full Marb presentation.
That's what I figured. Okay, will do. Thank you.
Well, just a question. I agree with the full Marb. Is timing. My understanding is that West Haven said they would submit the town budget by the subcommittee meeting.
Correct. We'll be handing it out at that meeting because it will be an
First time, so we will not have read it.
We can get it out to you, but it will be immediate. So it's like the Thursday before is the date that it has to be
okay.
issued. Okay.
And the 5-year plan, they're coming together, correct?
Supposed to be.
You. And the
Keep in mind.
when is the deadline for approval by somebody of that budget? I'm concerned about a time crunch.
Understand. Usually we try to get everything completed, and all of our budgets for the Marb have always been completed in June by our June meetings. Now, it sometimes has required us to have special meetings in order to get them completed. That's always been our goal because we don't want to hold back on the taxpayer, the billing. Right.
So
okay.
June is the thing,
Yeah.
and we obviously don't want to disrupt the
No.
tax collections, but will there be anything, and maybe you can't answer this now, but will there be any different procedures given that this is a first Tier 4 budget and we do have some control? There have been some issues in the community about what's going on, and is Whittlesey going to be helpful with this? Because
They're not part of the budget process.
Oh, let
Mr.
me just say
Make
this.
them?
Let me just interject if I may. I think that's going to be something we're probably going to discuss in the next couple of items because I had some thoughts about that.
Okay.
Um,
Whenever you want to discuss it.
you're absolutely right. We have a couple of points at which we as a board can affect change in the city. One of them is, the biggest one is probably approval of their budget. It would be my preference, my goal for the board that we be in a position to get some changes made in advance of approving. Hope Whittlesey will inform our efforts there. So, but we'll talk about that in a second. That's on the agenda. Other things from the subcommittee that we're not going to talk about that you want to highlight?
Sure. The other item is that the Board of Ed food service was brought up at the prior Marb meeting. We did take that down to the subcommittee on the public schools, and that the subcommittee was very happy to hear that the communities is participating in that program. The MOU action plan activities, they came forward and gave us a lot of updates. We heard some talk about vacancies in there, but we're continuing to pay close attention on that. And open items. There are a number of open items that were either cleared out or discussed considering the firefighters' hazardous pay. They are looking to have a tentative agreement to put forth before us by the April subcommittee is what we heard. Any open items that were about the 5-year plan, that will be included in the 24 budget. We discussed the fuel contracts and the E-rate program. So I don't see that we'll have a reason to do a dive into those today. We'll just put them in the materials today for information.
Well, we do have an open items list item later, so we'll.
Right. And our next meeting is scheduled for March the 21st. And our intention is to change that from an on-site meeting to a Teams meeting because of our lack of staff at OPM.
That and the fact that we can't get rooms at the LOB these days.
Correct.
All right. Anything else from the subcommittee? The subcommittee wants to discuss? Any members of the subcommittee want to mention anything? Up. Move on then to some substantive material here. We've got a presentation from the auditor. PKF O'Connor Davies completed the FY21 audit for the city of West Haven on February 23rd. And they are hopefully available today to talk to us. Ah, here we go. Hello. Identify yourself for the folks watching at home.
Sure. Joe Centofanti, a partner at PKF O'Connor Davies, who's responsible for the 2021 audit engagement.
Highlights? Sure. You green? Is your microphone green there?
Yep.
All right.
Better? Right.
Everyone here? Yep. Ms. Comer.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to use this to kind of walk through some of the highlights. And for the financial statements, there's an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. And again, the MD&A is a good executive summary of some of the highlights that happened during the year. So it gives you a good overview of budgetary highlights, capital asset activity, which is the biggest thing is the high school construction project and the related long-term debt for that project. So general fund, the unassigned fund balance at June 21 is that the $5.7 million. It's 3.56% of expenditures and transfers out, up from the 2.24 in the prior year. The net change in fund balance was approximately the 2.1 million. And you'll see the extraordinary item, casualty loss of 979,000. You know, that was based upon the known fraudulent transactions were just pushed into that one account. So there was some transparency around what we see again, just through June of 21. There's also a footnote disclosure on page 39 that talks about that. Just kind of looking, you know, where the positive operations came from. Revenues and other financing sources were lower than budget by 1.2 million. Property taxes were above budget of the 371. And the difference, the 3.9 was most of the rest of the difference was the restructuring funds that were budgeted but not received. So the better news is all on the expenditure side. It was under budget by the 5.3 million. That was driven by general government, so 1.6. Contingency fund was about 1.35 of what that variance was. Public Works was overspent. Benefits insurance were under by the 1.4, most of that being in the pension and medical line. And the education was under by 2.6, and then the casualty loss, again, not budgeted.
Sir Secretary, could I just have a question? Just to be clear on the casualty loss, is that the DeMassa embezzlement and that's it?
It's whatever else that might have been determined were fraudulent payments.
Could you expand on that?
So that's not, it was all related to whatever was dispersed that was determined. So he was not
Determined by whom?
well, mostly by, discussions with town council, city council, attorney.
I guess what we had, but I mean, it's when I say DeMassa, I just don't mean him, his circle, and that's because we've heard like 800,000. And so I just wanted to make sure I
Yep, it was all that related stuff. If it wasn't, it was identified as something that was questionable, or it was identified subsequent to be a fraudulent transaction, I pushed it to the separate.
Okay. And there's no offset for potential recoveries by forfeiture of the parties who've been convicted.
There is, but from an audit perspective, that's not something we're going to record.
Okay.
So that would be up for the city's.
So this is just the law, because we had some back and forth with the finance director, I guess, as to whether or not it would be booked with well, we think we'll recover 500, but you're just saying, here's the loss. I'm not dealing with what you might recover, which I hope is the right answer.
Right. From an audit perspective, until it's in the bank, I can't really
Gotcha.
audit that.
Okay,
It may
good.
show up.
Good, thank you.
All right, Allentown Fire Department, increase in fund balance of 573,000. Prior year was 766. So that budget seems to be working. We did set up a transfer out to capital non-recurring for that. There were some capital items that were budgeted, not spent. So I think that's a good strategy to be using for, both the fire department and the sewer department, which we'll talk about, because sometimes things are budgeted and they don't get to, just like the town from a funding perspective, the money's already taxed for. So I think there's some logic to setting up a separate non-recurring for both sewer and for Allentown, and that'll kind of level out some of the future budgets and capital requests. The pension, we'll look at the numbers. It's only 35% funded. That's something that definitely needs attention for Allentown. And the sewer fund, increase in fund balance of 1.5. The prior year was about 1.7. Part of that difference was the transfers out to debt services is going down on some of those clean water loans. So that, again, that budget seems to be working. But again, I think looking at these kind of numbers, I'm not sure if there's a capital plan or a replacement plan, but if that can be more formalized, I think that would help, again, long-term for the city to have a plan for that. Internal service funds. So I'm just highlighting the contribution to OPEB. There was $125,000 budgeted in 2021. The trust was not established at that point. So that money was pushed to the internal service fund because obviously appropriations will lapse. So I think hopefully, I don't know where we are, where the city is with that, but that could get established and then that money can be transferred into that trust to start funding that liability. We did have positive operations of almost 1.6 million. Again, we're looking at them in total because there are three different funds. It was 528 in the prior year. But just looking at a funding perspective, I like to use current ratio because some of these liabilities are longer term. So medical, you're at 1.8, 1.08. So again, that you're in good position there. The goal is one or more. General liability, you're only at 0.7, and workers' comp, you're only at 0.4. And that's just looking at current assets to current liabilities. So from a cash flow perspective, you're kind of running behind. So the goal is to kind of get it at least to one, because again, some of them are long-term liabilities. This gives you kind of a snapshot.
Mr. Secretary. On the last two items, do you have a ballpark of what it would take to get to one in terms of, you're talking large numbers, small numbers? We'll have a budget coming up soon.
Liability is not too bad. If you look at page 114 in the audit, so I'm just looking at, you have 21,000 in assets and 296 in current liabilities. So that one is a little over 250,000 to kind of catch that one up. Workers' comp is a little bit more than that, so 84,000 in assets and 1.9, almost $2 million in liabilities. Not something you can do in 1 year, but if you look at the operations, they've been traditionally funded just kind of at current year claims. There hasn't been a lot of funding to start eating into this. It's more just here's what current year is. So again, it's something to look at it, like you said, in the budget process, even just to start. We estimate claims at this, and here's what
Your percentages here, this goal of one is not actually fully funding even the entire liability. It's only funding the current liability. Is that what it is?
right. Just do you have enough cash at least to pay what you're going to owe next year?
Right. So I would suggest that really the objective should be to fund all the run out liabilities, or all the projected run out liabilities. It's certainly appropriate to discount those that run out into the future, so the liability can be discounted back to present value. But the intention of an internal service fund, correct me if I'm wrong, but the intention of an internal service fund is to have assets equal to liabilities, correct?
But, right, that's the perfect world, and then some reserve, because all the liabilities are estimates. So,
Right.
so depending on the type of fund, how much you need in reserve. But yes, I was just starting with a first step, but I 100% agree that it needs to be a longer term view, but I just wanted to at least get to the short term. But yeah, they should be fully funded.
Okay, I'll have some other questions, but I'll let them, why don't you continue? Okay.
Pension and OPEB. And unfortunately, this is very dated information, and I didn't look at where things were at June of 22, but the police pension was funded at 92%. That was a significant increase from prior year because of the market. Most of all of that probably was given back in 22. I don't know where we are at 23, so that was a good number, but it's not the same number today. And then again, Allentown at 35%. Again, that was a bump with the market. Same thing. So again, at 35%, that one needs some attention, and operations, at least the last 2 years, look like it would support some additional contributions there to kind of move that percentage up. And as far as the city OPEB, again, the trust wasn't established at 21. Again, I don't remember if it was at 22. 125 would be at least the first contribution. I don't know if they budgeted in 22 a contribution, but the liability is the 31 million at June of 21.
Hamilton.
The OPEB, do you know if the trust fund has been established in 22? Was it established or not?
I think it was close. I can't remember if it was actually set up. I'd have to check I'm sure I asked the question. I didn't look it up but I know it was close. I think city council adopted, but I definitely, an account was not set up.
Mr. Taylor's on the line. Do you know the answer to that, Mr. Taylor? No.
Trying to, there. Can you hear me now?
There you are.
Hi, thank you. David Taylor, Finance Director, City of West Haven. the trust is established. It is yet unfunded. We have set aside the funds to do the funding, and we are working, actually, about a few weeks ago, we started working with the same investment advisor we use for our pension, Raymond James, to establish an account. And as soon as that's ready, we will fund it for last year and this year.
Attorney.
All right, federal and state single audits. So for Yellow Book, the compliance, we had 3 findings, material weaknesses and significant deficiencies were identified, the vendor approval process, which again, ties into the CRF funds, and then segregation of duties for both city and education payroll, as far as the access to be able to adjust employee rates need to.
Secretary, I'm not sure if now's the time to deal with this, but I remember at this.
Mr. White.
Thank you. At the committee level, the city said they were going to address these findings, which I think we've seen before. I'm not sure if it's been 3 times or 5 times, but we've seen them before. And they said, oh, we're going to fix them. And I would like, I guess maybe when we talk to the city, I'd like to find out what's going to be done differently. Because it's quite frankly embarrassing to all concerned.
Well, they're on the line. Why don't we do it now? Mr. Taylor, do you have a reaction to those 3 items, the vendor approval process and the segregation of duties with regard to payroll?
Yes, we have established relatively strong, I believe, a vendor approval process. It does need some work, but this has all happened subsequent to the 21 audit.
Sure.
That will be ongoing. Excuse me, I'm admitting Bill Lindsay. So far as segregation, we've hit some headwinds there. We have created the positions in the past. We had a resignation. We actually have moved payroll out of HR where it was. It's now in the finance area. We have 2 HR postings currently. And we are, I'm not sure where we are in that process, but we are actively looking to hire them. And we have hired some consultants who are assisting us in that area in the time being. I don't know if anybody else has something to add.
Yeah, I wasn't sure I understood what's happening in the vendor approval, other than you're addressing it and it's ongoing. I didn't get the detail.
We did. Yeah, Rick Spryer is going to speak to that.
Hi, good morning. Rick Spryer, Procurement Director. So this is, we got to remember, looking 2 years back, and we have now established a vendor process for onboarding vendors. There are only 2 people in the city that are allowed to enter vendors into our system. They are myself and the buyer in my department. I'm sorry, let me speak. The finance director has privileges to add a vendor, but we do our best to keep Dave busy without doing things like that. So we do have a vendor checklist that I will provide for the April subcommittee meeting that is has to be filled out and submitted to purchasing before a vendor is set up. And this is, in working with Ed and his team in Whittlesey, helping us develop these processes and these redundancies to make sure that we don't fall victim to the problems we had in the past. So, but I'd be happy to update, send all these materials for the April subcommittee, our vendor checklist, which includes W-9 forms, any tax forms that need to be set up for a vendor, whether they're a 1099 vendor, and making sure that. Sorry.
Conflict of interest.
Yes, in our ethics disclosure and conflict of interest forms. All those have to be submitted now with this vendor checklist in order to get a vendor created into our Munis system.
I think we have a March 21st subcommittee meeting.
I'm sorry, yes, the March 21st subcommittee.
So we look forward to seeing that material then.
I'll have that for Simon whenever he needs it by. I will make sure I have it to Simon for sure.
Mr. Falsigno, you have a question?
I don't really have a question now.
Okay.
I have a statement, though. We've been doing the same thing for 3 years. You're telling me you guys are just getting to it now? I mean,
I'm telling you that I haven't been here for 2 years.
I'm not.
2 years prior to this.
Okay, all right.
But the city of West Haven's been working on this, and we've been telling the city of West Haven about this since I've been on this board. And it's not a question, it's a statement. So you're telling me that now all of a sudden we've just about gotten there after we've taken a $978,000 hit? Is that what you're telling me?
That's what
Finally?
he's telling you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. White, do you have a follow-up?
Actually, I'm a little more upbeat. I'm pleased to see that Mr. Pryor is in charge of this and that there has been some positive movements. I know you're new, and so that is, I'm hopeful. One of the issues, and I don't know if you've had an opportunity to reach it yet, but after the CRF report, there was some concern that there were fictitious vendors on the city vendor list, not the federal or whatever. And I'm just wondering if you have gotten to the point where you have looked at whether there are any fictitious vendors on that list, or if that is to come in the short term.
So the short answer to that is that we have a vendor list that is massive. We have duplicate vendors, and we started the process of cleaning our vendor list, and it is so cumbersome and such a monumental task that we are working with Munis that we are now upgrading. Our test site should be up and running in the next week or so with Munis to the newest version of Munis, where we can take our vendor list and filter it by any vendor that hasn't had a check cut to them in a year, and inactivate all those before that. So we may not be able to weed out exactly which ones of those are fictitious yet, but we can make it so that no checks can be sent to them. So,
Mr. Taylor, what if you just canceled your list and made everybody reapply and get re-vetted?
Well, I will tell you that there was a project that our buyer did, Rick's employee, that went through all of our vendors and made sure that we had W-9s for each one. So these people were contacted and updated. To the extent that we already had the W-9s, we did not request new ones, but at least that does sort of get through a number of them. We do make sure that people actually respond to emails, that people do provide tax ID numbers that are valid. And but yeah, there is more work to do. I don't really, I would not be favorable to shutting down every single vendor. And we've gone through a period of not.
Did we get their attention, I believe?
Well, they already have our attention because we are just breaking out of a period of time until this year where we're not in the habit of paying people timely. And we are doing that now. I really don't think it's wise to go back to that. And this, eliminating the vendor list and starting over, I think would have that result, at least in a short term.
I'm just going to echo comments we've made today, and we're going to make them again. As we draw nearer to June and the approval of your next budget, progress on all these matters will be of increasing importance.
And to me as well, sir.
Okay. Any other question, Mr. Hamilton?
Just like to follow up a little bit, and we can talk about it further at the subcommittee, I suppose. But you mentioned a checklist, a vendor checklist or purchasing checklist. Does that really comprise anything more than how to get a vendor set up onto the system? Does it sort of rise to the level of being really full policies and procedures that talk about some of these additional items that we've been talking about, like how do you vet that vendor list? How do you ensure that you don't have duplicate vendors? How do you, when do you purge the list or inactivate vendors who haven't had a check cut to them in a certain period of time. So is that all sort of laid out in what you call the checklist, or are those additional procedures really sort of still ad hoc?
Those are former policies that have not been written, but are, as you said, ad hoc policies. Our system now that we've updated as many W-9s as we could, we're not allowed to set up another vendor with the same W-9 if there's, the FEIN numbers, they make sure there's no duplicates there. So we're getting away from the duplicate vendors. Yeah, it's not a perfect policy, but it's a start, and we're moving forward with Whittlesey's help to develop formal policies and procedures that we'll be able to publish ourselves. So I feel like we're moving in the right direction, but yes, we still do have some work to go.
So I think the subcommittee will want to see everything that's actually written and in place, and a description of any informal policies, and then a game plan and a timeline of when you're going to have all the full formal policies and procedures in place and being adhered to and followed.
I can handle that.
I see Mr. Waxenberg has his hand up.
Yes, just to follow up, I'm interested. Obviously, the reason why we're here is because there is not been or has been, but ignored policies and procedures, not only regarding vendors, but payroll and all kinds of other issues. And I prefer to have somebody at the city level get their heads together and let us know when we're going to see written policies and procedures for the areas that we've been discussing and have found West Haven to be lacking. By what date can we expect to see something in writing as a body? I know you're working with Whittlesey and you have some staffing issues, and taking that into consideration, if you need outside consultants, I'd like to know specifically when we can expect some written policies and procedures dealing with the issues that we've been discussing over these past 6 years. And just to put things in perspective, Mr. Secretary, we were developed by special legislation. When I say we, Marb, in November of 2017, I believe, the first city to come before us in January of 2018 was West Haven, requesting to be placed under Marb. Presentation by the administration at that time in January of 2018, at which time Marb took it, along with 2 other cities, took under advisement and allowed that to occur. The 2 other cities that we're discussing today are on their way out of those doldrums and hopefully will find its way into the sunlight. We're still dealing with the darkness associated with West Haven, unfortunately. So we need more specificity. I understand people of goodwill, like the finance director and the procurement manager, doing their best based on ad hoc policies and procedures, which have found its way into fraud and mismanagement of monies at the West Haven city level, which was uncovered by a variety of different sources. So, it just becomes very frustrating, and I hope that under the new leadership or different leadership, we can get some specificity associated with what's going to be happening, rather than it's in the works, it's in the works, it's in the works. Again, a presentation was given to us over 5 years ago. That's how long. And I know people haven't been there 5 years, and maybe sticking pins in my eyes for 5 years is a little bit too long for me too, but that's how long I've been around. So I think it's necessary to move forward with all haste, if at all possible, to get those procedures and policies in writing based on the ad hoc policies that you're working with now. And I have other comments later, but that's my sense of the policies, procedures, and vendors for the day right now.
Thank you, sir. Continue with the presentation.
For federal single audit, there were 4 programs tested, 2 CDBG programs, the CRF fund, and a SIR grant. For that, we did have 3 findings. Procurement suspension debarment, which again relates to the purchasing policies. So you're talking about policies that needs to get into the policy. All the federal regulations need to kind of be embedded in there as far as what you could do. There are different bid thresholds and those type of things, but that will address that. And this is kind of a check that needs to be done. I think that's a carryover from the prior year. CRF grant to cash disbursements. Again, that process, it's tied to the whole same vendor process. And then the second part of the cash disbursement. And then CDBG disaster just for reporting. Every federal grant has certain reporting requirements, and some of those weren't getting done. But at the end, there was no question costs, unmodified opinion on compliance, total expended about $17 million in federal money. State, we tested 8 programs. I didn't list them all. They're on page 26 of that state single audit, the smaller report. And we had 3 findings, 2 of them related to subrecipient monitoring, because monies were passed down to run these 2 different programs to local daycares. And then another community conservation grant, just the reporting needs to be formalized. Again, whatever the due dates are, the reports need to be filed. But no question costs, unmodified opinion on compliance, and total expended was $8. And I haven't completed a formal recommendations, and I didn't even discuss these with the city, but some of these are pretty black and white, and I asked this question, so I tried to be proactive. Other things that you might need to know, capital assets, I think that at this point, it needs a physical inventory. The purchase order system needs to be implemented, so we're talking about this vendor process, but without putting that in place, if an invoice is already showing up, hopefully it's going to be blocked. But this is a critical part to that whole purchasing thing is everything has to have a PO and nothing can move without having the PO. And that's going to address a lot of the other risks.
Sir Hamilton.
This is really a question for the city, but the purchase order system, I think we've heard from the city subsequent, that system is now being used and is operational, and can Taylor or someone in the city confirm that?
That is correct. We are using the purchase order system. I think there are pieces of it, we're in the process of improving the use of that system, and we are using it. I would say that the number of items that do not go through the purchase order system are drastically reduced, just a few. But we are moving towards getting everything in there.
And the timing of that, so are you expecting that this audit finding is not going to be repeated in the 22 audit? Or do you think it will be repeated in the 22 audit, and because it wouldn't be corrected until the 24? I'm sorry, 23.
Yeah, I understand.
My years.
I expect that that there might be a comment in the 22 audit as well. Having not been here for that period of time, except for the very end of it, where improvements were made, it might be possible that this comment would be added to that towards the end of the year. Things look better, I hope. But that's where I think we'll be.
All right, under city, the cash disbursements, it's just the employees printing the checks, you're not also mail them. I think that's just a basic control. Bank recs, just looking at formal documentation doesn't mean they're not being reviewed, but from an audit perspective, unless there's formal documentation, I don't know that they are being reviewed. Same with journal entries. There are some that are reviewed, some that are not, but without the documentation, I can't verify. Grants, cash management, there's a lot of grants. I think that position was open, but there's a lot of grants where the reimbursement requests were not being prepared timely. So again, of course, basically the city is fronting those payments. So just to get that more timely. Bidding, the big documentation should be, retained and secured. Again, there's a better process, I hope. Same with the quotes. So whatever the policy is, that documentation it needs to be available for audit purposes, as well as to support some of the federal requirements. Public Works Sewer Finance Departments are responsible for all billings. Is a standard comment made to everybody. A lot of departments do billings, so we have some accruals that get missed, that get picked up in the audit process. But somehow they at least need to be looped in to make sure that the things are getting into the right year. Budget transfers, you'll notice that in the footnotes, there's a lot of departments that are overspent. I think the budget is supposed to function as some sort of control, so I think that's something that needs to be put into place and to increase the monitoring of why things are going over, and city council to be involved in approving whatever whatever needs to be approved. Payroll, this education, just HR should review employee change report. Again, standard recommendation, even with the segregation, that somebody is making sure changes make sense. Education grant expenditures, this has been there a little while. I'd like to see that the transactions are booked as they occur to the grant versus moving them later on from a different place. Just sure that things end up in the right place at the first time. Tuition, some of that tuition revenue is being recorded as a credit to expenditures. That's not in accordance with GAAP. So we like to see that revenue, and again, from a budgeting perspective, then that should be shown on that side. Equipment financing, city council should approve all issuance of debt because technically they're filling out the tax form. So education departments don't have the authority to do that. So I think city council needs to be in the loop if it's equipment financing, whether it be computers or trucks or whatever. That applies. Budget transfer, same on the Board of Ed side, even though it's at a much higher level, at the object level. We look at that to make sure that you can't move salaries to benefits without Board of Ed elected body approval. So we like to see that being monitored. And then I'm just going to say, just from an observation standpoint, the business office runs a little lean. I just see, from a monitoring and control standpoint, that the business office could benefit from some other accounting person in there to help. It's a big operation, and from I look at it from control. Operational is not something I comment on, but I do look, from an internal control standpoint, I think that would add a lot of value. All right, and then I'm just gonna.
Hamilton has a question.
This, are you going to be putting these recommendations in the form of an actual management letter, or is this it?
I can, but I feel like 22 is going to be the same thing. So if you want to memorialize 21, I can. I just pulled this together so that I can at least talk to the highlights. There might be some other, other matter type stuff that, I'll vet with the city, but we're already in 23, so it's up to you. You want to memorialize it, I certainly can do that, or otherwise in 22, I will make sure I issue.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
And upload them to our portal.
Yep. Okay. All right, and just, I already briefly talked to the city about a couple of these things, but just to highlight something that's delayed a lot of audits, and OPM could attest to that, is this lease standard, which is effective for 22. So I mentioned to the city that they need to kind of start doing that and have the same conversation with the Board of Ed. And similar to GASB 96 on this subscription-based software is really going to impact the education side dramatically as compared to the city side, to be aware of that, as far as holding up the audit, to be as in front of that as they can.
Okay. Do you have an update on where you're over the 22 audit?
All we did we did a little bit of work along the way, but we're kind of really in the preliminary stages. So I don't know that, and I have to check with the city if, I assume they're closed or not closed to get final trial balances. We did some transaction work. We did conference. So we tried to double up when we were doing 21 for some of the basic, but we haven't really started with the financial statement side at this point. So I'm projecting hopefully towards the end of the month, when I get a few other reports uploaded, wrapped up, that we'll then move, and I'll have, more resources once I be able to move that hopefully a little bit faster. But
So my working assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, is Whittlesey is obviously doing a real-time, present-day look at what's going on in a broad way about governance, financial control. We're obviously aware of all of the work of the other auditors that has been done, including Cohn-Resnick, work that we've got a report on today. So I'm hoping and assuming we're going to have some kind of comprehensive repository of all the recommendations that have been made and as yet acted upon, so that we can, going forward, begin to, as I say, the rubber is going to start to meet the road here as we move forward. We've got a budget to approve. We've got contracts to approve. And I'm looking forward to beginning to check off in real time real progress. I see Mr. Waxenberg had his hand up.
Just quickly, under the federal single audit, you have CRF grant cash disbursements. Could you explain that a little?
Well,
under your findings?
Sure. I mean, that related to conceptually the fraudulent transactions. So clearly there weren't controls and the right controls in place for those to get paid. So we reference it kind of to CRF because that was kind of the umbrella that was used to pay those expenses. They didn't ultimately, they weren't CRF expenditures at the end of the day. There were other expenditures. So that's why it was pushed into that other category. But something around that process that led to, that was how they were submitted initially is relating to COVID-19 and what they needed to do. So that was kind of the way they were presented. At the end of the day, they weren't actually charged to the grant. So I tie it to that process because that's what everybody understood was the way it was facilitated.
Thank you.
Hamilton.
Ask a couple of questions about the capital improvement fund and the future fund, the due tos and the due froms. And I'm trying to understand, some of this question may be for you and some of it may be for the city, but I'm trying to understand the exposure and whether or not there's expenses for which, at least as of June of 2021, bonds had not been issued, because I'm looking at the numbers and it's showing a total fund balance of negative 22 million, of which the unassigned portion is negative 31, and then there's a restricted portion or a committed portion, 9.5. There's bond anticipation notes outstanding at the same time as 6.5 million. So 6.5 million of the deficit in that fund would be presumably extinguished when those bonds are permanently financed. But that begs for me the question of, well, how about the rest between the 6.5 million and the negative 22 million, or maybe negative 31 million. I'm not quite sure what the restricted portion is, but it looks to me like there's been capital expenses that have been sort of fronted, if you will, paid for by funds that are part of the general fund, and that, which would indicate to me there must be some amount that hasn't been financed yet that is also doesn't have any bond anticipation notes outstanding. Is that correct?
Conceptually, what I don't know any details, yes, I'm going to say the high school project's probably driving that, and I'm not sure the timing of those reimbursements or that. I know the city just did go out to bonds, so I don't know where it looks now, but conceptually we describe, yeah, they have to be behind because although that's why there's a deficit as far as.
Okay, okay.
Bonding.
So maybe you just mentioned the high school project and state reimbursements. So maybe the answer, I'm hoping, is that it's state reimbursements that haven't yet been received, although they aren't booked as a, well, no, there is intergovernmental receivable here of 6 million, which presumably would be the state grants receivable on that project.
I would have to look. We tend to try not to record those as receivables because at least towards the end of the project with the audits and all that, it goes the wrong way. So the last few payments we don't book. So I'd have to look at what that is. I think a lot of that's related to some of those urban action grants and a bunch of the others. That's related to my recommendation that the city needs to request money sooner because they're fronting a lot of other projects and not requesting. I know there were a couple of projects with over $2 million that they hadn't requested the monies from the state yet. So I don't think any of that is school building, but I certainly can.
Okay, so I guess my follow-up, and I don't think it's for right now, but again, maybe for a subcommittee meeting, and this is to the city, is a sort of more itemized accounting of the capital project fund. It would, obviously we want to see it in current time. Where does it stand right now? If there's a deficit there, what is the plan to, take care of that deficit, whether it's issuing additional debt or it's expected that state grants are going to cover it, or, whatever, the answer is. But I'd like a little more detail from the city on the capital projects fund. And while they're doing that, I think it would be useful. I noticed the audit report also showed as of June 2021, about $66 million of authorized but unissued debt, which I think it would be important to also understand, what is that debt? What is that authorized debt for? Is it going to be, the project's going to go forward? Is the debt going to be issued? Is that sort of been built into the 5-year plan that they are, have provided to us in terms of their capital funding and debt issuance strategy? So I think that would also be important for the subcommittee to look at. Again, I don't expect them to sort of answer it off the cuff right now.
Mr. Taylor has his hand up. You have something to add, sir?
Yes, Mr. Hamilton's comments and questions dovetail very neatly into item D on our list. And I just wanted to mention that Mr. Lindsay is sitting in an airport waiting for another plane to pick him up on his phone. If we could possibly maybe get to that after Mr. Senapani's presentation, it would be a polite thing to do if it would please the board.
Is that something we could wait for the subcommittee to deal with, or you want to talk about it now?
Item D on the list is review and discussion of West Haven bond issuance. And
I see.
Just out of respect for Mr. Lindsay, he is the one who will be talking that item.
Okay.
Perhaps after Mr. Senapani, if you don't mind reordering the day, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, you want to do it now is what you're saying?
When Mr. Senapani has completed his presentation.
All right. I believe he had completed. Are there other questions from the board? We'll move on then, so that we can get the bond anticipation note issue done. Without objection, I assume we can skip to item D there under the City of West Haven, review and discussion of the West Haven bond issuance. Thank you for coming, by the way.
Sure.
Appreciate your time. Look forward to completing the FY22 audit with you. Thank you.
Thank you very
We'll
much.
proceed to the West Haven proposed bond anticipation notes issuance of 2023. The city has, I'm told, 6.5 million, some 6.5 million in short-term GO bond anticipation notes, which were issued last September, and they mature this month. They provided a summary of the plan of finance for refinancing this debt, and they're going to provide us an update. And please do.
Yes, by David Taylor, Finance Director. Just by way of introduction, Mr. Lindsay is our consultant for any bonding, works for Munistat, and he is on the line, and I'd like to turn it over to him.
Great, thank you, David. Again, this is Bill Lindsay from Munistat Services, and I apologize, I'm not there in person. As David indicated, I am actually traveling today, so I apologize for any ambient noise you guys hear in the background. But as the Secretary stated, the city does have 6.53 million actually in notes that the city had issued back in September. If you recall, they were rolled over for 6 months, and they're coming due at the end of this month on the 28th. The city's been working with both underwriting firms Raymond James and Piper Sandler to roll those notes over, and the plan is that the city would reissue those notes for another 6-month period, maturing on September of the 28th of 2023, and at which time they would be permanently financed along with additional capital that was proposed or included in the city's 22-23 capital plan. I'm happy to report, since the time that we provided this memo to the staff, we've been able to negotiate with the current holder of the notes. It's Aberdeen Investments, who are willing to take the notes as a direct placement for an additional 6 months. So we've been working towards having a public sale, but the current note owner has agreed to extend the term for an additional 6 months at an attractive rate or a competitive rate. And so that's the avenue that the city's taken at this time. Within the plan here in the memo, we did want to highlight a couple things. One, that this does not have an effect on the current year, that is 22-23 operating budget. The interest for the maturing notes from September was budgeted in the budget, and then the notes will be maturing next September, which is obviously going to be 23-24 fiscal. So as the city is developing their budget, we've given them a number to cover that interest portion as well. Finally, within the memo that I provided, you'll note that we given you some changes to what the city's 5-year plan was. To dovetail with Mr. Hamilton's comments, because these bonds were originally contemplated, bonding was originally contemplated last September, and then again this year, it's going to push out what the debt impact will be, with a kind of a ripple effect through the 5-year plan. But happy to kind of note that the amount of debt service that will need to be incorporated into the new revision of the 5-year plan is actually coming down as a result of a couple of things. Some capital projects that were originally in the 22-23 CIP were funded with ARPA funding, and then it's just really a bit of a timing. But most importantly, the city's debt profile continues to decline, and so we're able to structure the proposed debt and to take advantage of those drop-offs in the existing debt service. So that's really that's really my summation. I don't know if there are any questions on the plan.
Questions of the board, Ms. Kennison?
Yes, this isn't the first time we've rolled these notes, correct, Bill?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. We originally, the plan had been to bond last September. Unfortunately, the city's market access was in question, partly due to the fraudulent activities and then the delay in the 2021 audit. So we pushed them here 6 months till now. And then with the change in staff at the city level and not having a current audit, current being the 22 fiscal year, it was decided that we would roll these over for another 6 months. That would allow a permanent someone in the role permanently in the finance office, and then additionally the 22-23 capital plan. The capital plan was adopted, but a corresponding bond ordinance was not. And so this will allow the city time to get that borrowing ordinance both adopted and to you for your approval.
Thank you.
So this refinance does not require approval by the board, this particular transaction? Question to the staff? No?
Apologize, I do not believe so.
Okay. You say it's been done before. Did the board approve those?
Not, but I trying to remember 6 months ago, were we under tier? Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Go ahead.
yeah, yes, I
New,
believe that.
right.
Yeah, they were
rolling.
not under tier 4. And again, this is Bill Lindsay again. I don't believe they were under tier 4 at the time in September, but
Right.
I believe that it was because this is a legacy borrowing and predated the tier 4 and the principal amount of it isn't changing here. My understanding from talking to bond counsel and corporation counsel is that they were of the opinion it did not require a vote.
Signal?
New money.
I know you're rolling the bonds over and the bondholder is giving you favorable rates. Explain that a little bit more. I mean, how can that not have some impact on your cost of borrowing? 5-year plan.
Did you get the question?
I did. Again, bear in mind, it's a short-term instrument, so it's only going 6 months. So the coupon rate that they proposed, which is a 5% coupon rate, is the coupon rate we had already estimated into the 5-year plan. So there's really no change there. So that's in large part why.
I'm going to just go out on a limb here, out of an abundance of caution, and propose that we approve this or not, whatever the will of the board is. Mr. White, do you have a motion?
Yes, I would move to, out of abundance of caution, to approve the,
Thank God.
essentially the extension, the extension of these bonds for another 6 months as proposed. I just that's the motion. I take it as an aside. In September, we're going to be presented with permanent financing of this and some additional capital budget expenditures, which I think we should discuss. But
Sal Luciano, second.
I heard a second.
Sal, second.
Sal Luciano.
That was Mr. Luciano, I believe, seconding the motion.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Mr. Hamilton?
We have Bill Lindsay on the line. Bill, and this isn't necessarily directly on point with respect to this motion. I will be supporting the motion, but in terms of my earlier comment about the status of the Capital Projects Fund and whether or not there's any additional amounts that need to be bonded, do you know if there are, beyond the 6.5 million, do you know if there are additional projects that have already been completed that still need to be bonded, or what's your understanding on that?
Yeah, no, Tom, that's a really good question. The only project that I'm aware of is the high school project, and obviously that's the biggest undertaking the city has done in a number of years. I think with respect to your question regarding the deficit position in the fund, my understanding from talking to the communications with the chairman of the building committee, that there's a sizable amount of grant that's still due from the state. So it's north of 14 million. And they've been waiting on a change order. My understanding that was that they've been working with the state to get approved, and with the expectation that once that change order is approved, they would be receiving additional progress payments. that would be going to the fund. Whether or not ultimately the city needs to bond more than the 6.5, we're going to have to see what is approved on the change orders, and where that brings us. There is a possibility that the city may need to borrow more, and we'll have a better sense of that in the next couple of months. But they do have sufficient authorization under the original bond ordinance to borrow more if indeed they need to.
The discussion on the motion. Approved.
One sort of technical question. I thought I heard you say it's a 5% coupon. Is that correct? And that's there's no premium or discount on this transaction, correct?
There is some premium. It's relatively modest. It's a 5% coupon at a 4.50 yield, is what we negotiated with the current holder. So there will be, I think it's $9,000 when it's all said and done in premium that will be used to offset some of the issuance cost.
Okay, so four and change for an interest cost.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, thanks.
Further discussion on the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Aye.
Abstentions? Carries. Mr. Lindsay, are you need to be available here for the next item, which is the capital project bonding ordinance for 22-23? City's going to provide an update. You're proposing the issuance of $13.8 million in bonds to appropriate and finance a portion of the city's 22-23 capital budget.
Yeah, I believe David Taylor is going to speak to that. I will say that again, the plan would be is once the ordinance is approved by both the city council and the Marb, is that will be included in the September borrowing. So the 6.5 in notes for the high school will come due, and we will be adding something in the neighborhood of 13 million to that to cover the 22-23 budget.
Okay. Any questions?
That is correct.
Any questions from the board? Mr. White.
This is for information only. We'll be discussing it later.
It's on our.
I know it's on our agenda. Is this for approval or?
No.
Discussion today.
Discussion today. Approval later.
Discussion. No, I was just looking at some things. I don't want to waste time on small points, but the public works, these are vehicles that are being replaced. A 2004 Crown Victoria that's being replaced. What?
Need to see the capital budget.
Pardon?
We need to see the capital budget list.
We don't have the full capital budget. Is that what you're telling me?
No.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Effectively, the city would like to withdraw this item until September. We are not intending to bond at this time. And as Mr. Lindsay had mentioned, we plan to follow the process, late summer, early fall to seek approval and bond in September. So this.
Okay. This is a heads up. You're giving us an update. Okay.
Yes. And I'm sure that list that you're asking about, Mr. White, will be changed.
Other questions? Mr. Hamilton.
Question in terms of the financing, how we normally set up the repayment. It's just because of the list. Now, I guess this list you're saying is not really what you're proposing. I don't quite understand all the vehicles, but I guess my point is, if we're buying replacement patrol cars and passenger vehicles, I hope we're not financing them over a 20-year period, but are going to finance them over the life of the vehicle. Is that correct?
This is typically how the city has financed, through bonds. I was asking similar questions the other day, but this is typically the way we do it. The cars are still out there that we want to replace. So they've been in use by the city. Obviously, they're still not on patrol, but because newer cars are required for that, but they are used by city employees for various duties. Again, this is, we're asking that this be withdrawn, and we'll come back to you in September time.
But David, if you'd like, I can address Mr. Hamilton's question.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Tom, no, they're not being financed for 20 years. You know, and I don't know what you have in front of you in your packet. The ordinance did include a detailed list of the projects and the amounts. So we had developed within the plan of finance, an amortization schedule based on service lives of the assets that we got from the city. So I think as David indicated, certain projects may fall off of this, whether they were partially funded by other grants or other methods. But when we do come back to you in the fall, we will have both a detailed debt service impact, where you can see that the amortization is not a straight line 20-year amortization. It'll be front loaded based upon the list of the projects. So where the equipment and the vehicles are included in there, it'll have shorter useful lives.
So it sounds like we can move on from this item then, and we'll let Mr. Lindsay get on his plane. We'll go back to the regular order.
One item I would just like to mention. Sorry. I would think that they would have some of this information in preparation of their budget, so that if this information is included, their debt is included as they are projecting.
Yeah, good advice. This should be part of what you give us as budget in the next month or so. So whatever you have on that. We'll move on then. We need to move on. We are respectful of people's time. We'll go back to item 6C. I'm sorry. Yeah, 6C, the Tier 4 update. Update on our consultant Whittlesey in terms of their activities. Since we brought them on, they're going to give us an update this morning. And we welcome, I see Mr. Engberg on the line. And Mr. Sullivan. I see Mr. Sullivan as well. I'll turn it over to you fellows.
All right. Well, thank you for your time and good morning or almost afternoon here. We do have a presentation that we want to share. Is it okay if I share it from my side, or do you want to share it on your side?
Can you take it over and
Yes.
share your screen?
Perfect. I'll share my screen.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I just want to confirm that everyone can see my screen that I'm sharing. Okay, so all right, so Whittlesey's we're gonna provide an update on where we stand on our engagement that we have been engaged to perform regarding the assessment and evaluation of West Haven. I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview, look at it as a refresher on the scope of our engagement. So our engagement is covering both the City of West Haven and its Board of Education. Again, it's an assessment and evaluation. It's covering the organizational structure, policies, procedures, practices, and internal controls. We're looking at financial management, administrative processes. We're looking at financial systems. One of the things I wanted to make sure I covered is that our engagement is going to be completed over 4 phases. We are currently in phase 1 of our engagement. Going to the next slide, the areas of focus within phase 1 are looking at inventory of policies and procedures. We're looking at internal controls. Within internal controls, we're focused within this phase on looking at cash disbursements at both the city and the Board of Education. We're looking at procurement, and we're also providing an update on a Bloom Shapiro Munis report that was performed in 2018. Moving on to human resources, we are providing updates on compliance reports that were performed by the Human Resources Consulting Group. And we also had included in phase 1 looking at staffing. Additionally, we also have an IT team that is working on performing 2 assessments. one for cybersecurity, and one for a technology assessment. So now I'm going to go in and provide a little bit of more update, a little more color on where exactly things stand within each of those sections of our phase one. We currently have provided our observations and recommendations on our inventory of policies and procedures to both the City of West Haven and its Board of Ed and to Marb staff. Looking at the next steps for this section of our phase one report, we've incorporated feedback received to date. We are currently waiting to complete the IT section of this section of our report. We are currently, and we'll cover where we stand on the IT section a few slides down. But really, we're just waiting to finish writing up the observations and recommendations for that section, and then we can complete this section of the inventory of policies and procedures. Regarding internal controls section of our phase one, looking first at cash disbursements, we have provided observations and recommendations that we have sent over to, and we've sent over to both the City of West Haven and its Board of Ed. The City of West Haven, we're still awaiting feedback. We've been in communication with Dave Taylor, and we're expecting a feedback in, I think, within a few days regarding that. From the Board of Ed, we've received feedback, and we actually have a meeting shortly with Matt Cavallaro at 1 p.m. So we're gonna walk through his feedback on both the cash disbursements and also the HR update that we've sent over. From there, we will provide the observations and recommendations to the Marb staff to obtain feedback from them. Regarding the procurement and update on Bloom Shapiro Munis report, I'm in the process of writing observations and recommendations. I've met with Rick Spryer numerous times on that, and I do believe we currently have one item that we're waiting to get from Rick Spryer, but I believe we'll get that shortly. And the next steps on that are providing observations and recommendations to the City of West Haven and to the Board of Ed for feedback. And what we've asked within our process is that we are providing those observations, recommendations to the city and to the Board of Ed, and we are asking for any comments, changes, edits, and also to just let us know if there's something that we might have understood incorrectly. We want to make sure everything we report out that we're all on the same page, and so that's why we're going through the process in this manner. Regarding the status of our human resources section of our phase one report, we've provided our observations and recommendations to both the City of West Haven and the Board of Ed. Again, on the city side, we have received some feedback. We're waiting for final feedback from the remainder of the stakeholders. Again, on the Board of Ed side, we will be talking with Matt Cavallaro at 1 p.m. today and going through some of his comments regarding that section. Once we've received feedback from all stakeholders within the City of West Haven and its Board of Ed, we are then going to proceed with sending those observations and recommendations to the Marb staff for their feedback. Regarding the staffing section of our engagement, we've discussed this with Kim Kennison of the Marb, and we are going to move this section to phase two. We've completed some work under this, and the work is ongoing, and we have a plan of action in place for continuing that work. Moving on to the last section that we are including within our phase one of our engagement is cybersecurity and technology assessments. We are currently in the process of writing our observations and recommendations. We've completed our field work. I mean, there might be some follow-up here and there, but we're in the process of writing up those observations and recommendations. Once that's completed, we're going to get that out to the City of West Haven and its Board of Education for feedback, and then we'll continue the process as we're doing in other phases and get that information then out to the Marb staff for their feedback. Overall, looking at next steps, we want to have all observations and recommendations reviewed by the city and its Board of Ed. We want to make sure that all of our comments are at least being understood, and that if there are any edits or changes that we're in agreement with that should be made, we'll certainly make sure those are made. And outside of that, what I am offering is to have a meeting with the mayor to discuss our observations and recommendations. I think we could have a sit down and go through those items and just provide any further commentary at that time. We'll certainly do that, once we get the final feedback from these sections, and then we can do that, based on the mayor's schedule and whoever else the mayor would like to have in that meeting. And we're certainly open to taking any questions and providing any commentary at that time. After that, we're going to provide our Phase 1 report to the Marb staff for feedback, and then from there, we will present the Phase 1 report to the Marb board and staff. I will stop sharing our presentation at this point. Are there any questions or feedback at this time?
Yes, Mr. Ingberg, what is and I'm looking at the staff as well, what's your time frame for providing the Phase 1 report to the staff for feedback?
So, I'm sorry, are you referring to the Marb staff or the West Haven?
Marb.
So we're currently working with Kim on talking about the date for our presentation. I think we're looking at probably towards the end of March is approximately what I'm expecting right now for when the Marb staff would have our Phase 1 report for review.
Mr. White has a question.
Just a quick refresher. I know we've had this information, but could you give us a quick refresher on the other 3 phases of your engagement?
Yes. So the other 3 phases are going to be based on how we are assessing the risk of the items included within our work order. And so we have each phase is being set up based on what we've deemed to be the highest risk items that we can complete within that phase. We've kept it fluid, so that way, if certain items do pop up that we now deem to be a higher risk than previously thought, then we have the ability to then move those things around. I can certainly give a little bit of commentary on 2 areas that will be covered in our next phase, but there's certainly, other items we will be able to further evaluate once we've completed our Phase 1 or as we get closer. But 2 of the areas will be at grant management and governance, and then as I stated previously, we've moved the staffing and hiring section of our engagement to Phase 2.
I guess one of the reasons I asked was to see what extent your findings play into our budget discussions. If you're finding weaknesses in certain areas, then that may inform the decisions Marb makes about certain budgets. So I don't think now's the time to have a back and forth, but I would encourage the staff and Whittlesey to go back and forth to kind of prioritize those things that might inform our budget discussions, especially looking at, I don't know, weaknesses, which would be, things where money may be slipping through the cracks. That's something we'd like to know sooner rather than later.
And just to provide a little commentary to that, one of the things that we've discussed with Kim Kennison is developing, to the best of our ability, a level of prioritization to the observations and recommendations that we're coming forward with, to put them in a high, medium, or low priority, so that way there can be some level of ability to focus on, what's the highest priority to focus on at the time.
Well, when you say you're going to do priorities, what's the governing principle of the priorities? I appreciate priorities, but I need to know what they are. You said level of risk.
Yes, we're going to prioritize it based on risk.
Such as cash. Cash is king. So they've already done some assessment and evaluation on cash. Grant management is coming in the next area. We've just had theft in that area. So they're taking a look at that arena to make sure that we can close down those doors that are open sooner than later as the highest levels of risk.
And reporting that we found some slippage, let's close the door, but let's also talk a little bit about the horse that got out of the barn now that we're shutting the door.
And so when they also talked about disbursements and the disbursement processing,
Good.
he has some of that as well.
Okay, and that seems to be
Yes.
rising to priority.
It is.
one. Good, excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
It's a great question. The reason I asked my question about when we were getting phase one feedback is my thought heading into budget season was that obviously this is going to take a while. We're not get it all before this budget, but whatever we know between now and say the April meeting that we can, and either could be Whittlesey's work product or it could be something that the staff produces that summarizes and prioritizes some action items that we expect the city to have completed before we give an affirmative vote to the 24 budget. That's my working assumption. I'd like to figure out as a group, what do we want to see? What do we know that's coming down the pike as a recommendation? And what can the city do for us in advance of the budget to show that we are making progress? Obviously, we got one shot at the budget. We could obviously, theoretically, I'm just thinking out loud here, hold them to the current year budget for some period of time. There's a number of options we have. Approval of their budget is within our power. So we will be able to enforce action items going forward using that tool. So that's my goal, to begin to look at what are action items we want to see short term, middle term, long term. And Whittlesey's work is going to inform that. The staff will try to refine that, obviously with input from the subcommittee. That'd be my goal.
I think that's helpful. I still remain concerned about the time crunch, which is probably less than 90 days, and the fact that we have not dug down as deeply as I think we're going to, just to the city to sort of cut back time. It sounds like in the 5-year plan, we would like to see, and I don't want to speak for the board, but we certainly would like to see an address of the internal service issues fairly aggressively. We'd like to see a pay down more aggressively on OPEB. And we, quite frankly, I know I would like to see where you want to be on your fund balance at the end of 5 years. I don't know that that's something we should impose initially, but you look at that, make a decision, then I think we decide whether that's the way it goes. And there may be other things, especially on the cash issue, if we think that there's slippage, whether we do things like we're going to have a contingency fund that will cut the budget, have a contingency fund, and maybe the financial manager has to approve any expenditures from the contingency fund. I mean, I don't know what we can do, but I think we ought to start thinking. Now's not the time to have the discussion, but I think we ought to be thinking about those kind of things, because we're going to be getting more granular than we ever have. And so just a thought.
To be clear, I agree with that the budget should be providing for reforms that we see the audits have told us need to be made. I'm talking beyond budget provisions, right. Other things, governance issues, personnel matters, action items we'd like to see before we say yes to the next budget. So that's where my head is on. Other questions of Whittlesey on their assessment activities to date? Mr. Hamilton.
Noticed that in a couple places you indicated you're awaiting feedback from the city of West Haven, and I just wanted to hear from you a little bit about whether or not you feel you're getting the level of cooperation and responsiveness from the city that you expect and need for the engagement.
I think, big picture, I think we certainly are now. We're absolutely getting the level of engagement that we're needing. I do know that the city has, some staffing issues and that have been in place or have recently taken place. So, the communication has been there regarding when we're getting updates. And so I am expecting an update later this week. I also will put it out there. I'm willing to go down to West Haven and sit with whoever. It could even be on the weekend. I know sometimes quieter times are better for looking at things together, especially with what's on the plate of the various staff at West Haven. So, but I think the cooperation has certainly grown, and I think everyone's been in sync. Up until most recently, and things are moving along.
Other questions of the board, comments, concerns for the Whittlesey assessment to date? Obviously, we are getting close to some action items here.
One last comment.
Ms. Kennison.
I'm just going to echo, as I have in the past, is to make sure that the city and the Board of Ed ramps up their staffing. If they haven't filled those positions, they need to do that. They are going to continue to struggle. We have a lot on our plate, a lot of work that has to get done. And if it causes delays with Whittlesey, their feedback, then that will also impact. I know that David mentioned that he's brought in some staff, and I'm glad to hear that. I know that we've been talking about this for some time. So they need the hands.
All right, there's some advice out to all listening. We'll move on then. Thank you, Ed, to the Eds, Mr. Ingberg, Mr. Sullivan. Good to see you. We'll see you again soon, I'm sure. Next on our agenda is under the Tier 4 updates is OAG research, legislative language. This is just a report out, I think, by me that staff did talk to the Attorney General's office about research related to takeover legislation. This was requested at the last board meeting, I gather. Attorney General's office is not in a position to draft or do research on this at this time. They indicated they would prefer a full vote of the board for something like that. I'll just say that my own view here is that if it got to that point, and we're nowhere near that yet, I'll be doing that research and I'll be drafting that legislation and taking it to the General Assembly. I don't see us doing that anytime soon. We are at the beginning, as you've just seen. We're at the beginning of the process with Whittlesey. We're beginning to have some action items. This board does have powers that we will begin to exercise with regard to their budget, with regard to contracts, with everything that we can use under the statute. We will do so, and we will exhaust all those avenues. And if we get to a point where we've done that and we still aren't where we need to be, I will be leading the charge for a takeover. But that is not for today, and it's probably not for this summer or even this fall. So to the extent that people are worried about that, just everyone take a breath. We're working on this. We're going to get to a better place, I'm confident. So that's what I would say about that. Mr. White.
Yes, I concur. Although it's off the table for the short term for sure. I think this is just a comment that there is an election in November, and I think that the decision on how the city is run, both mayor and council, is up to it's best decided by the voters of West Haven. And I think that's important before we did anything like that. But I would hope that there would be a robust discussion about the finances of West Haven and, more importantly, the culture. This has been going on for a long time, and we've expressed our opinions, but I think it's time for the voters to do that. And I think the notion of public comment is important. At the appropriate time, I would like to make a suggestion as to how to engage the council in that at whatever time you feel is appropriate, while West Haven is still here.
Okay. We'll move to other business for that item, but we'll do that when we get there on the agenda. If the city can please stick around until we've completed our agenda, that'd be appreciated. We'll finish that item, then I move on to the update on the RFP for the financial manager. Ms. Kennison's got an update for us.
Yes. So the committee is worked on reviewing all of the proposals that have come through, and we are actually meeting immediately after this meeting to make a decision on those proposals. That's my quick soundbite.
For those listening at home, the financial manager, the intent there is that will be a consultant that will be embedded with the city once the Whittlesey assessment is done and once the board has begun to make its action items known to the city. This manager will sit with them and assure the implementation, granular and detailed level of these reforms.
Just a question on the timing, that we're not waiting for the completion of the full Whittlesey report, but, especially cash management, I'd like, so, okay, so that the notion would be that the financial manager would be in place in April?
No, not April, because we won't even have a contract completed by April. We're going to complete our review. We're in March already. And once we get through our review and a selection, we're going to interview them. We'll decide to have an interview, the committee. And then if we choose, and then from there, if we have valid candidates that once we get done with that meeting today, then from there, once we've made that selection, then there's also a reference checks that have to happen. So there's a couple more steps still to happen. Then we go into negotiation. After the negotiation, then there's contract writing. So we'll probably be lucky to get into it takes weeks to get a contract out at any agency. So we'll be lucky if we have a contract through the end of April.
Okay, so starting in May. Because one of the things I keep in mind is that they've been in tier 4 for a year and we don't have eyes on the ground. And I know the thought was, let's have them be informed by Whittlesey, but I think we've seen there's good reason to have eyes on the ground, because it's going to take that person some time to get up to speed even before that. So anyway, my own notion is you've got to do what you have to do, but sooner rather than later is probably good, especially in the budget. Well, it sounds like the financial manager will not be in a position to comment on the budget, which is, in hindsight, that would have.
Okay. Other questions, comments, concerns about the financial manager RFP? Right. Moving to conclusion on, in the fullness of time, get full benefit of their services. We'll move then to, if we're done here, we'll move to the review and discussion. I'm sorry, we've already done that. Let's move to the review and discussion of the monthly financial report as of January 23. That report was provided in your materials, and the city is here. I assume that's Mr. Taylor to provide us an update. Over.
Let's try this not on.
There you go.
Happy to report the city is in good shape so far as against the budget, and the projection, as you see, is favorable. Working down through the revenue, tax collection continues to proceed very well. Year to date, we've brought in 91%, and we are projecting to collect it all. Licenses and permits, which were slightly below a straight line forecast last time we reported, are now at 62% with 58% of the year gone. We're projecting we're going to hit about 80%. You might remember that when this was talked about last time, there were some large capital projects that we think will happen, we believe will happen. And one of them indeed did come through and pull a permit. And so that's why we've caught up, and we continue to also have some softness in planning development. So we're being a little bit conservative in that area. Interest income, we're over $600,000 against an $81,000 budget. As I mentioned before, we're sitting on more cash due to ARPA funds that we have, and tax collections, which has been very good. We anticipate continued favorability, but at a lower rate as we begin to pay for these ARPA projects, which are in progress, as well as other obligations. Federal and state grant projections are year to date are on target and projected to stay that way. And all other revenue items are projected to be on plan.
Questions for the city regarding their January 23 monthly financial report? White.
Okay, on the, first of all, I'd like to compliment you on the summary. It really makes it a lot easier to focus on that which is important. So thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. On expenses, other contingency, wonder if you could explain a little more. You talked about reducing expenses by 500 budgeted for COVID clawbacks. I'm a little puzzled since I thought there was a charge in 2021 of 984,000. Or is this the Cohn-Resnick saying you submitted bills to the feds and I don't think they're going to approve them? That I guess I'm not quite sure what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that, Mr. White, and everybody, because this is a bit wordy, and I apologize for that. We did have a contingency for $500,000, and it had to do with disallowed items that were submitted for the CRF. As you know, Cohn-Resnick came back and said that there was $100,000 that was disallowed. And, you know, we've all seen the report on that. Thanks to the OPM who provided the city of West Haven, and as well as other municipalities who had similar situations with the Cohn-Resnick findings. They sent us a note and asked us if we would like to reassign those items that were not applicable to CRF to other items that we could do so. We identified some police overtime that was paid in that period of time that was actually in excess of the amount that we needed to be able to support the rest of the monies, the $100,000 that was disallowed. And we informed OPM that we would like to reassign those disallowed items to police overtime. And they agreed. So this actually was part of Mr. Santafani's audit, and he's commented on that today. I would like to add, because there's been some comments, at no time was anything other than police overtime charged to the overtime accounts in the city's financial records. And Mr. Santafani would have been sure to report that if that had happened. So I hope that clears it up a little bit. To move on with the contingencies, I did want to say that despite the fact that those certain contingencies do not exist anymore, including this 500, we've taken the conservative approach of not releasing those and holding back for any other items as they might come along.
Thank you for that, but it says potential COVID-related clawbacks based on a determination in federal court. What is the federal court?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the federal court, that's very poorly worded. Again, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, the federal court would be the hearing that occurred. I don't know how that would lead to a federal clawback now that you read this. I really need to address this next time, and I apologize.
Well, is this at some point there was some notion that the sentencing court would have a forfeiture order regarding Mr. DeMassa and et al. And is this referring to that or something else?
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah, and I apologize again, but the sentencing has not yet occurred for Mr. DeMassa, so we really can't comment that. However, and I want to repeat, we did flow those expenses as Mr. Centofanti reported earlier today through the
Right.
fiscal 21.
So that's old business.
That's old business.
And the only potential would be that, Mr. DeMassa had won a lottery ticket and he's going to be able to pay some stuff back, but pending that, we'll wait. But the 500 related to the Cohn-Resnick report that said, I think these are going to be disallowed, and that's kind of through the back and forth, they're saying, well, maybe it won't be disallowed, or you've moved it.
Well,
elsewhere.
yes, as you might remember, they identified $890,000.
Right.
And we were able to satisfy all but 100 of that.
Wow, good.
Yeah, and that's why the report says 100. And so we were then able to, at the good graces of OPM, substitute those items that should not have been submitted for items that should have.
$1,000 that was disallowed, is that what ended up in the police overtime budget?
I'm sorry, sir, I did not hear the question.
Wasn't if I remember correctly, wasn't there something that was put into the police overtime budget? Something that was last meeting? Yeah. Something that, was that the overtime for the non-union employees?
The police overtime actual and budget reflects police overtime. There were comments made in previous meeting.
Didn't Mr. Jackson say something, make a reference to that last time he was available?
He may have, and I believe I addressed that just a moment ago. That refers to the reassignment, that we were allowed to reassign police overtime to the CRF submission in replacing those items that Cohn-Resnick and frankly the city agreed were not appropriate. It had nothing to do with making entries in our books.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, other discussion of the financial report. We'll move on then to review and discussion and action on non-labor contracts. We've got the first one is the sale of the yes, Mr. Hamilton. Okay, I'm sorry. Board of Education prepared to discuss the January financial report.
Yes. So to date, through period 7, we are outperforming where we were at this time last year. We were very hesitant to come off the flat budget projection due to the questions surrounding the excess costs grant funding calculations. We feel if it's put back to the calculations of the past, that we will see some favorability. If it's the current calculations, we feel confident that we will be able to produce a balanced budget. Right after my meeting with Whittlesley in a few moments, I do plan on reaching out to Mr. Penn to get some more information on that magnet school tuition grant that he spoke about, to see if West Haven would be eligible for such a grant. And I do plan on having a budget transfer available for the Marb to vote on at the next meeting. Our next Board of Education meeting is March 20th. So I won't be able to have it in advance of the subcommittee meeting, but if all goes well and the board approves it, I will have it that day.
Any other questions, comments on the BOE section of the budget financial report for 2020? Okay, thank you for that. We'll move then to the non-labor contracts aforementioned. First one is the sale of the William T. Blake building. Purchase and sale agreement was reviewed and discussed last month. The appraiser attended a subcommittee meeting, answered questions from board members. Sales price is under the appraised value by about $9 million, it looks like. But the city has provided a letter that was in your packet.
9,000.
Hello?
9,000, not 9 million.
Oh, I said 900, 9,000. Yes. Is that Mr. Tiernan?
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. I recognize your voice. Anything else we should know about that before we discuss it, sir?
It's just a good project for the city. It's a mental health group. I think in addition to it being a good developmental sale, a good group, we're allowing West Haven business to expand. They're going to provide greater mental health services for the city, and that can only be a good thing.
Mr. Biller has his hand up.
Hi, good afternoon. So can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm a little technologically challenged at times, so thank you. So, I realize obviously this is not the biggest item that's going to be on our agendas in the past few months or the next few. And in full disclosure, I don't feel good about the deal, but I'm not going to oppose it. I don't like the process that went into it, or lack thereof, to be honest with you, to get to what I think could have been a more equitable sale price, which would have likely resulted in a bit more money to the city. I also don't like the fact that there's been no effort whatsoever over the last 5 years or so to market the property during what's been an inflating real estate market. I don't like that, here we go again. The city's done next to nothing for years, kicking the can down the road, and now we're told, hey, this is the best deal we can get. And even if we could get a few dollars more, it's going to cost the city more to keep the vacant property on the rolls, which is probably true. Had the city done more over the last few years, then maybe all of our backs wouldn't be up against the wall as they are now. I certainly respect the appraiser, his qualifications, his comments, and I don't have any issue whatsoever with the business with whom I am not familiar. I applaud the services that they provide to the community, and I applaud their efforts to stay and invest money in the city. This has nothing to do with them. And despite that, again, I'm not at all satisfied with the city's efforts to fulfill due diligence and conformity with its fiduciary responsibilities to the taxpayers. And however, what I don't want to do is I don't want to let my displeasure with the city's processes affect the taxpayers who already have enough to worry about. And denying this project will probably pass. It's probably going to pass with or without my vote, but it's only going to cost the taxpayers more to deny this sale. So I am reluctantly going to vote to approve it when my time is there.
Other questions, comments about this item? We have a motion. White moves to approve. I have a second.
Second.
Ms. Comer has a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Bill, your hand's up again.
Oh, that's just me. I'm sorry. I'll take it down.
Okay. Without further discussion then, all those in favor of this item, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Ayes have it. Motion carries. The item is approved. Next item is the land lease option and lease agreement. Green Skies Clean Energy LLC. It's a lease agreement between the city and that entity to lease approximately 15 acres of land. The term of the lease is 21 years with an option for 18 months. Its lease income would be about $35,000 annually. It's been reviewed, discussed, and recommended to the full Marb for approval by the subcommittee. City is available to answer any questions. Is that you, Mr. Tiernan?
Yes, sir.
Anything we need to know about this?
It's a landfill. If you look in, I tried to provide details in your information packets. It was probably a disposal site going back more than 100 years. And it doesn't, for the last 30, it's been a closed cap landfill, so it doesn't provide any income to the city on any level. It was privately owned, but the owners did not pay taxes. And the owners also did not maintain the cap. It may not sound like you have to maintain a cap much, but it requires, caps. For you folks up in the north, if you drive on 91, you'll see the landfill just north of Hartford, and you won't see trees and you won't see ATV tracks and so on. So this will allow the project to have proper maintenance. It's supported by DEEP. DEEP would prefer that we put this in place. Moreover, you're very limited on what you can do to monetize old landfill space. This is one of the few things we can do. So we think it's a good project, and it should show results this spring, late spring.
Questions from the board? Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton moves approval. Do I have a second? Mr. White seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Items approved. We'll move to the Rockdale Road Sewer Construction Services Contract with Elm City Materials, Inc. It's an agreement between the city and that entity for construction services of sanitary sewers in the Rockdale area. Agreement has a term of 240 calendar dates for $579,400. It was reviewed, discussed, and recommended to the Marb by the subcommittee. City is available to answer any questions. Mr. Tiernan, anything we need to know about this?
I would defer to the purchasing agent. This was handled by our engineer. I can bring the engineer in. I'm sure he's here if people have any specific questions.
Questions from the board? Have any questions? Do I have a motion? White, do you have a question or a motion? Motion from Mr. White to approve. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Hamilton and Ms. Comer. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Say no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Items approved. We have there the open item list chart that was included in your briefing materials or materials for the meeting. We did have an extensive discussion at the subcommittee level on all these items. Got updates, closed out a few. Are there any items that board members have questions about at this time? Mr. White.
I don't know if it made it on the list, but at the subcommittee, we suggested that there be a report at some point soon as to whether the city thought that it could bring any actions against parties civilly to recover monies that had been wrongfully paid, maybe by municipal funds. There was the caller last, I can't remember if it was at the committee meeting or at the full meeting, had talked about some overtime that had gone back to the city council that had been disallowed. It wasn't, anyway, that there was a number of things in the Cone Resident report. I understand that some provisions in the city charter that if certain procedures aren't followed, somebody could be personally liable. I know Mr. Egan, when he was on the board, had mentioned that several times. So I think just a first cut, without doing an investigation, but based on existing allegations, whether the city has grounds to claw back any of that. I'd like to see that on the to-do list. Again, my concern is if there are such things, that who is going to bring an action to bring him back, since it's not federal money and it's not state money. That would be my request.
Sounds like a good question. Hopefully we can add that to the open item list. If someone at the city, perhaps Mr. Tiernan, could take on that question, let us know at some point what you find out. That'd be appreciated. Any other open item items for the open item list from the board at this time? We'll move on then to briefly, if the city can hang on for a second, but we'll move quickly to the town of Sprague item. There was a financial report for January submitted. It was distributed with meeting materials. We do not, I believe, have the town with us today, but if board members have questions, the staff can contact the town for responses. Do we have questions for Sprague? All right, we'll move on then back to other business, which is our last item. I will bring up, and I think we probably ought to open the agenda to talk about this. This isn't, Mr. White alluded to this earlier. So I'll just move to open the agenda to talk about a potential to invite the city council to join a meeting of the Marb. I think that's the, am I correct that that's the gravamen of the request? And if the board is okay with that, we'll do that. I'll just take a quick vote. Any objection? All those in favor of opening the agenda to discuss a potential invitation to the city council, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? No. Abstentions? That sounds like 2/3. So we will open the agenda to discuss. I'm going to recognize Mr. White.
Yes, I think that we've mentioned this before at the Marb level, whether the mayor has spoken to us through her representatives and has attended meetings. Of the council, really not so much, and that they are very much part of the leadership of West Haven. We've talked a little bit about the culture that involves them as well. And I think it would be productive to have them come either as a group or separately. I'll leave it to folks to work out the logistics. But what I would foresee is asking council members, number one, what they saw that might need changing in West Haven in terms of financing and the procedures that they have, whether they're aware of any instances that they believe might be inappropriate, what their constituents, what are they hearing from their constituents about things that are going on in Westport. And I don't mean, in West Haven, I don't mean, people are ticked off and putting shoes in compost, but I mean, things that affect what Marb does, that is the budget and those kinds of things. And finally, to have them say what we could be doing differently or what we shouldn't be doing. I think we ought to listen. I'm sure, there won't be a standing ovation at the end of the presentation, but by them. So I think it would just be good. It would be good for the public to hear that, for us to hear it, and for members of the council to hear it. So I hope that can be arranged, and I think Councilwoman O'Connor had made the same suggestion, and I think that's worthy of pursuing.
Is the idea that we would, at the next meeting of the full Marb board, we'd have an agenda item discussion with the city council, as you stated? Getting a nod?
Sure.
I have no objection to having that as an agenda item. Obviously, we will invite them. We can't compel their attendance, but happy to invite the city council to come to the meeting. Where's the meeting going to be in April? Do we know yet? They can join remotely, of course. Well, we can work that out. Mr. Hamilton, do you have a
comment? Since city council members typically have day jobs, I don't know whether having it, be with our regular Marb meeting, how many would be able to attend.
Yep.
We may need to think about a special meeting in the evening, but maybe a bunch of them are retired and could make it. Who knows? I don't know.
Right. I think that's also when we're going to have to discuss the town hall idea as well. That sounds like something we might want to do. That's obviously going to involve going to the city one evening, presumably. So that would be a couple of evenings we'd be scheduling in sometime in the spring, but happy to have that discussion going forward. We can work up a recommendation for the board. Any other? Ms. Comer's got her hand up.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Chair, and apologies for my voice. That's why I'm not there, because I'm not feeling my best. I guess my only comment is that as we structure this invitation, that we be pretty clear about the parameters. What I want to make sure that it's productive. I'd hate for it to become, sort of this partisan who shot John type of situation. So while I do think that engagement with the council is important as municipal leaders, I just hope that we're putting up some guardrails so that it is the most productive dialogue possible.
Point well taken. Mr. Taylor, you have your hand up.
The mic on.
I have it on. Hi, it's actually Councilwoman O'Connor.
Hello.
And I just wanted to echo Mrs. Comer's concern. We do want to speak with you, but we don't want to have it a 20-minute, argument. We want to have productive, useful things that will help both sides of the issue. So I would really encourage the meeting for all of us, but please have the parameters so we're not accusing or saying you did this, we did that. That will not be helpful to anyone.
Points well taken, I assume. Yeah, we all have jobs. We as a Marb, Mayor Rossi, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I absolutely think it's a wonderful idea that because a lot of the city council members, to the point that was made here, do work during the day and would not have time, other than with an evening meeting. The only thing that I ask is that if you folks come to wherever we come to, that the city council be noticed as a meeting per FOI, only because of the fact that we won't know how many people are going to show up. And if there's a quorum, which is 7 there, it would be a violation of FOI. But I think it's a fabulous idea, and I hope we're able to do it. Thank you.
Well, it would be a meeting of the Marb. We would notice it as a special meeting. I believe we'd probably travel to West Haven one evening as a board, although we could, I suppose, have a remote option. Presumably you have facilities there for that. Question to you? Okay. I'm happy to work on that.
Okay.
And I'll attempt to chair it and attempt to keep things professional. That's always good advice. I was about to say, before you started speaking, that we are all professionals here who have jobs to do. We know the council does and the Marb does, and we will, we'll have that expectation going forward. Anyone else in town have something? I see the hand up again for Mr. Taylor.
Oh, I just would add that we had 3 council members in attendance at the subcommittee meeting, and she's here every time. So there is some representation, but this will be a good thing.
Okay, I look forward to it. With that, the last agenda item is to adjourn. I have a motion from Mr. Faustino, seconded by Mr. White. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.